Tao and choreographer and dancer Caleb Teicher at the Hat on February 7th and 8th. Tickets at ringling.org.
WUSF and WSMR members can purchase tickets to our Longest Table event before the general public. To become a member today, support your favorite public radio station and save your seats for April 8th at WUSF.org. The Longest Table is sponsored in part by St. Petersburg College Foundation.
Images out of Minneapolis have been inescapable in recent weeks. Federal agents shot and killed 2 city residents while they carried out immigration raids. Amid the chaos on the streets of Minneapolis, we want to take part of this hour to check in with you. How are people in the Tampa Bay region reacting to what they are seeing, and what questions do you have? Are you wondering how to protect your mental health and your constitutional rights? I'm Matthew Petty, and today on Florida Matters Live and Local, we're inviting some experts in law and mental health to weigh in, and we want to hear from you. Call 813-755-6562 or email FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Later this hour, NASA's big rocket is almost ready to blast off for the moon. Yes, we're going back to talk about what this means for the future of space exploration and the real history of a festival celebrating a perhaps fictional pirate, all about Gasparilla. All this and your calls coming up after these headlines.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Trump is heading to Iowa today, where he is looking to recapture the narrative. NPR's Frank Ordonez reports Trump hopes to turn the page back to his economic agenda as his administration faces growing backlash over his immigration crackdown in Minnesota.
The White House says the trip is the beginning of what will soon be weekly travel ahead of the midterm elections. But veteran strategist Ryan Williams says clearly Trump is looking to wrestle back the national conversation after a second death at the hands of federal agents.
The primary news story at the moment isn't just the ICE-related shooting, it's the response to the ICE-related shooting. That's what's going to be the focus, and the president can attempt to focus on the economy, on what he views are successes of his administration on the economic front, but he's going to be stuck talking about this issue for a significant period of time.
Some Republicans are calling for further investigations and questioning Trump's broader goals with the crackdown. Franco Ordonez, NPR News.
The National Transportation Safety Board is holding a hearing today on the factors that they believe led to the deadly mid-air collision last year between a Black Hawk helicopter and a passenger jet above Washington, D.C. 67 people died last January when the helicopter and American Airlines plane collided near Reagan National Airport. The meeting is set to outline the multiple safety systems that failed that caused the crash. NTSB Chair Jennifer Homendy, in her opening statement, said that the crowded airspace surrounding Reagan National cannot solely be blamed for the tragedy.
Within a robust system, the introduction of a single error is almost never the only cause of an accident. Rather, several barriers of defense must fail for the error to lead to an accident.
The leaders of longtime U.S. allies are making high-profile trips to China, seeking a thaw in relations with Beijing at a time of tension with the United States. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is heading to China today. NPR's Lauren Frere has this from London.
After Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney visited China, President Trump threatened 100% tariffs against Canadian goods and predicted that China would, quote, eat Canada alive. Now, as British Prime Minister Starmer heads to Beijing, Eurasia Group analyst Mujtaba Rahman says
he's going to have to be very careful not to annoy Donald Trump, but clearly believes there are economic returns from a deeper and more cooperative relationship with Beijing.
This is the first visit to China by a British Prime Minister in 8 years. Starmer is bringing a plane load of British CEOs with him. As he reduces dependence on the U.S., he's seeking to woo investment instead from the world's second largest economy, China. Lauren Frere, NPR News, London.
The Dow is now down 360 points. It's NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive, with small business insurance for protecting a variety of business types with multiple coverage options, designed to fit business owners' needs. More about small business insurance is at progressivecommercial.com.
You're listening to WUSF 89.7. I'm Craig Kopp. About 12,000 people have signed a petition opposing a proposed cruise ship terminal on the south side of the Sunshine Skyway. Corey McKeever started it. He operates a boat repair service in Bradenton and says he goes fishing in that area all the time. But he says the dredging needed would kill seagrasses and cause massive disruptions to fishing and boating around Terracea.
I got nothing else to lose. I'm going to either go out of business because of them or I'm going to die trying. That's it. Plain and simple. They will put me out of business.
SSA Marine is behind the plan that would develop about 300 acres of the mangrove-covered coastline. The company says it would allow newer, larger cruise ships that can't go under the Skyway to ports in Tampa Bay. Manatee County officials still need to approve the project. A Florida Senate committee approved a bill creating a voter eligibility database Monday. Over the years, Floridians who have served time for felonies have been confused about their voter status, sometimes leading to arrest for voter fraud. Bill's sponsor, Democratic Senator Tina Polsky, says it's time to clear up the process.
With this bill, the legislature can increase government efficiency, reduce errors and confusion, and increase the likelihood
pay off legal fines and fees. Polsky's bill passed with bipartisan support. Well, we have another cold night ahead of us. Another freeze watch in effect tonight through tomorrow morning, with a predicted low in Tampa of 35 degrees. Shelters are being opened throughout the greater Tampa Bay region tonight. You can find a county-by-county list of those shelters at WUSF.org. I'm Craig Kopp, WUSF 89.7 News.
Discover stories, interviews, and inspiration from Tampa Bay's creative community at artsaccessflorida.org.
Support for WUSF comes from listeners like you and from Sarasota Memorial Hospital, the only hospital in Florida to consistently earn a 5-star rating from the U.S. Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services since 2016. You can learn more at smh.com.
This is Florida Matters Live and Local, sponsored by Badawi Law. We're broadcasting from the Doctors Lorraine Rubis and Neil Frankel studio at WUSF in Tampa. I'm Matthew Petty. Well, it's nearly impossible to avoid images of immigration protests in Minneapolis on our TVs, on our phones. 3 weeks ago, cell phone cameras captured the death of 37-year-old Renee Good. Federal immigration agents surrounded her car before one of the team opened fire. And this weekend, people in Minneapolis once again recorded federal agents killing another person. VA nurse Alex Pretty died after being shot 10 times. He legally had a gun on him, but he wasn't holding it when agents surrounded him. Now, we should note there are 2 agencies involved in this federal immigration crackdown: ICE, or Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and Customs and Border Protection. Alex Pretty and Renee Good were U.S. citizens, and these deadly incidents under the Trump administration are provoking powerful reactions from across the political spectrum. And though Minneapolis is far from Florida, it is hard not to be affected. Today on our program, we will ask, how can we protect our constitutional rights and each other, and how can we sustain our mental health at a time like this? The number to call if you want to get in on the conversation, 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562. You can also email FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. And here to help answer some of these questions are Clara Reynolds, who's President and CEO of the Crisis Center of Tampa Bay. Clara, thanks for coming back. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here.
We're also joined by Clara Torres-Spellici, First Amendment lawyer and professor at Stetson Law. Chara, I should say. Thank you so much for joining us, Chara.
Of course.
And Elizabeth Beringer, Stetson Law Professor. Elizabeth, thank you as well.
Thank you for having me.
And as I said, we want you to weigh in. What questions do you have when it comes to your mental health, your constitutional rights? What are you thinking when you read and see images of protests unfolding in Minneapolis? 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562. Email us, FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Well, Clara, I want to start with you. We spoke in the past on Florida Matters Live and Local about mental health during a hurricane. You talked about how people experience grief, survivor's guilt, and loss after a storm. I'm just kind of wondering if some of these reactions that you've seen after natural disasters are similar to what people may be experiencing, what you're seeing after witnessing what's happening in Minneapolis and other immigration enforcement raids across the country?
I think we can all believe that trauma is happening in multiple areas right now. We're seeing the impacts of deportation on families and friends. Obviously, we're seeing it played out in Minnesota, but that's also impacting individuals here, whether or not you have connections to Minnesota or whatever your situation is right here in the Tampa Bay area. And we also know that the individuals living in Minnesota right now have been impacted by the shootings, along with the witnesses that have been impacted. So the trauma is widespread throughout not just Minnesota, but we're all seeing it, as you mentioned, Matthew. We're seeing it happen live and in person. So there are so many areas that are causing a lot of distress. And some of that distress, really moves into safety concerns.
Right.
Do I need to make sure I'm carrying my ID and passport? What do I do if I want to protest? Could I get hurt? What about using my camera? What about my Second Amendment rights? All of those things are creating a lot of, again, just confusion and really impacting people's emotional and mental health right now.
We should acknowledge too that there are a range of responses and reactions to this, and a lot of folks are looking at this and saying, look, what are people doing interfering with law enforcement, federal agents? What are they doing? So it's not all just kind of coming from one side. And I imagine some of those conversations may be quite uncomfortable for folks too, if they're maybe disagreeing on how you see and how you react to what's happening up there.
Absolutely. Even if folks agree on that, enforcement is important, the specific implementation of the enforcement can be very divisive. And I think you said it beautifully, Matthew, that there are heavy feelings and debates that are happening on both sides, and that they are so extreme, it's hard to have a conversation. And it's also hard to be able to figure out how do I just manage all of my emotions as all of this information is coming at me all the time. And I think that's another important part of this, is that we're getting updates. We're seeing this happen, not just in real time, but over and over and over again. So, some of the trauma that we're experiencing is just because it is in our face all the time.
Let's get a call in here if we could. We've got Sandy weighing in. Sandy, you're on the air. What are you thinking?
I agree with the speaker now. We need to make sure that ICE does their job, but correctly. And my mother was an immigrant who came in here legally. Now, I also am totally against people jumping on the bandwagon and just protesting. We got to wait and see what the investigations say. But I must say, I would get out of the car if a regular cop said, get out of the car. Okay? Now, I got to say, I lived in Colombia a lot of my life, and this country was not ready for South American crime. I'm telling you, Tren de Aragua, MS-13 Angels, they make the Crimson Bloods look like Girl Scouts, okay?
Right.
So, you guys, we do want these people out of our country.
Okay.
Please don't just stand in the way of
Sandy,
ICE agents.
I hear what you're saying. It sounds like you're in favor of immigration enforcement, that you want to see it done correctly. I appreciate the call. Let me bring in Chara Torres-Spellacy, professor at Stetson Law, on that. I mean, what are you kind of seeing in that? And when you see how agents are acting, what kind of goes through your mind? What's the kind of legal take on that?
So I guess I always think about this as a constitutional law scholar. I'm reminded of advice given by Justice Brandeis 99 years ago. He said that the greatest menace to freedom is an inert people, and public discussion is a political duty. I think one way to shorthand that is that protest is patriotic. We all have a First Amendment right to protest because we have a First Amendment protection of the freedom of speech. And we have a right to protest with others because we have a First Amendment right to freedom of assembly, so long as it is peaceable. So I encourage peaceful protest of government action that you find abhorrent. And I am just sort of amazed at what the people of Minneapolis have been able to do over these tremendously trying weeks.
Yeah. We've got another call coming in from Annabelle. Annabelle, you're on the air. What are you thinking?
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Sure.
I would like to say that I'm absolutely horrified as what is happening in this country right now and how quickly it escalated. I am myself an immigrant from Europe, so I feel lucky that I am, quote unquote, a good immigrant because I am white, I have blue eyes, I am not targeted in the streets. But the renewal for my green card as well as my citizenship applications are pending, so I still do feel very worried on a personal level. And I can tell you that I grew up in the shadows of World War II in Europe, not just a chapter in the history book, but with very personal stories from my family. And I had two main questions since I was a kid is, how could the Germans let it happen? And what would I have done if I had been alive? After 12 years in the U.S., I'm starting to understand the first question better. I see it all around me. And as far as the second question, I think it is time to find out. And I will keep protesting peacefully, legally, but I will not be silenced by what is currently happening.
Annabelle, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for your call. I really appreciate it. Really personal kind of reflection there from somebody who's come here from Europe. And if I could get Professor Berenger's kind of take on that, I mean, just thinking about, like, at a protest, what are your rights? Like, what can you expect? What should you expect from law enforcement if you're out there exercising your constitutional rights to protest?
I think in the modern age, we can expect, or we should be able to expect, mutual respect between law enforcement and peaceful protesters. So as my colleague Chara so eloquently put it, this isn't an essential part of our democracy. Protest is part of how the public is heard. We have other avenues available as well, but protest is an essential part of that. When protesters are peaceably assembled and are protesting what they find to be abhorrent practices, particularly government practices that they find abhorrent, law enforcement is supposed to respect their right to peacefully speak. You should not expect to be tear gassed when you are present at a protest. You shouldn't expect to be arrested because you were present and protesting peacefully. Challenges can arise when the protests escalate, when they no longer are peaceful. And we've seen that in other times and other places. And I think what the remarkable thing about Minnesota is right now is that it has stayed so peaceful up until now and is continuing to remain peaceful, despite what could be characterized as a lot of provocation. There have been some extreme things that have happened on the ground. Mm-hmm. 2 people have been killed. A baby has experienced tear gas.
Sure.
A 5-year-old was separated from his parents, and so there are a lot of things.
I think the 5-year-old was taking along with his dad, right? If I'm not mistaken.
They were separated.
Oh, they were. Okay.
It occurred simultaneously, but they were separated, and to my knowledge, they have not been reunited. But regardless, the people of Minnesota have remained peaceful, and they have remained calm. And so I think that's a good example for how to do protesting that makes an impact, because we do see the White House now in the last 24 hours or so has been discussing changes to its approach.
Let's keep the conversation going. We're talking on Florida Matters Live and Local about how you're seeing what you're seeing in Minneapolis, Minnesota, how you're feeling, constitutional questions about your mental health with Clara Reynolds with the Crisis Center of Tampa Bay. Also with us, Professors Chara Torres-Spelliscy and Elizabeth Berenger with Stetson Law. Want to hear from you. 813-755-6562 is the number. You can give us an email to FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Stay with us.
I'm Ricardo Cuomo, and I'm a WUSF Zimmerman School Radio News intern. At WUSF, I found an incredible group of people who supported me and taught me a lot throughout my time here. Everything I know about the radio industry, I owe it to them, and all the amazing opportunities I've had as an intern. With your help, future journalists like me can get the opportunities we need to grow in our careers.
The Sarasota Fine Art Show by Hotworks is this weekend at Sarasota Art Museum. Discover original fine art by professional artists from around the country. Saturday 10 to 5, Sunday 10 to 4. Admission is free. Details at hotworks.org.
It may not snow in Florida, but winter is still a season of giving back. When you donate your car, truck, or boat to WUSF, you support local journalism that keeps our community informed. Pickup is easy, and your gift may qualify for a tax deduction. Visit WUSF.org or call 866-WUSF-CAR.
Welcome back to Florida Matters Live and Local. We're talking about protests in Minneapolis, Minnesota, over ICE and immigration enforcement actions there. What we're seeing, the 2 people shot dead by federal agents. What are you thinking and feeling? Do you have questions about your constitutional rights, questions about mental health? With us for the first part of this hour, Clara Reynolds with Crisis Center of Tampa Bay, also joined by Professors Chara Torres-Spellisy, who's a First Amendment lawyer, and Elizabeth Berenger, Stetson Law Professor and expert on the Fourth Amendment. They are both with Stetson Law. We want to hear from you as well, 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562. How are you feeling right now? What thoughts are going through your head? What's top of mind for you as you contemplate these protests unfolding in Minnesota and think about what's coming next? Let me just read an email here, if I could. Greg in St. Pete says they're acting like stormtrooper Gestapo. Greg, I should say, says his friends own a UPS store and has Hispanic workers are showing up less. Sales are down 25% because people are afraid to come in. He says this is not a free America. These actions are about creating fear, intimidation, and starts to defeat democracy. So thanks for those that email, Greg. If you've got calls as well, you can give us a call, 813-755-6562. Clara, on the issue of protest, I mean, we've talked a little bit about people, exercising their right to protest, but there's another element to protest too. It can be helpful in kind of processing what you're thinking and feeling too.
Yeah, so many times we feel powerless in this process. And so by being able to protest, it's a great way of helping you, really be able to figure out how you can be a part of the solution. And as we've been talking, I've been thinking about this, first of all, you've got to recognize your feelings and understand that it's everything you're feeling is valid, whether you're upset, anxious, confused, you're saddened by the news. But in order to be able to move to that next phase, you've got to actually do something. So protesting is a very wonderful way of feeling like you are taking back some control in an uncontrollable situation. Also volunteering in ways that will, make you feel like you're helping find a solution or helping the situation are very important as well. So I agree with our legal scholars that, not just is it a legal right that we have in this country, but it also really helps being able to manage lots of emotions.
Yeah. Let's get a call in here. We've got Tricia weighing in. Tricia, you're on the air.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Sure.
I've been in Iraq and Afghanistan and in Eastern Europe several times during the fall of the Soviet Union and throughout both of those wars. I've seen these tactics before. They're usually very done by the oppressor. I think for all of us, the psychological impact is really fear and almost it is terrorism, basically. We are all scared when we're going to be next. Who's going to shoot us next? I'm surprised there haven't been more accidents in the past. So I think this is impacting the country as a whole. And it shows us just because you're American doesn't mean you're not going to be impacted by this, as we've seen not only in these deaths but others. So I have a question, though.
Sure.
I'm hearing that a lot of these recruits have been from both the Proud Boys and Blackwater. That's the rumor in kind of my national security circle. So I was wondering, what is recourse for that? How can we find out about it? These are definitely illegal actions by everyone, and why are they still on the streets?
Tricia, thank you so much. That's a pretty detailed question. I appreciate you, first of all, kind of weighing in with your experience there, and then that question. Chara, I'm going to see if you can have a go at answering that. I mean, obviously questions are swirling about the identities of some of the folks who are involved in the enforcement operation. But what would you tell somebody like Tricia who's like thinking, what kind of legal recourse do we have, and how do we find out more about what's happening here?
Well, one thing that is a live issue is what type of funding will the Department of Homeland Security get from Congress? So one action, if you are not a protest in the street kind of person, is calling or writing to your member of Congress. And this is using a different part of the First Amendment, which is your right to petition the government for redress of grievances. So if you object to ICE agents being masked or ICE agents being secretive, that is something that Congress could change and could decide we're not funding this anymore. And this is a live issue because of the way that Congress has been lurching from continuing resolution to continuing resolution instead of doing year-long budgets. And we may well get another government shutdown, and it'll be a fight over the funding for the Department of Homeland Security. So if this is something you care about as a constituent, I would encourage you to call your member of Congress and your 2 senators.
Thanks for weighing in there. Let's see if we can go to another call here. We've got John on the line. John, you're on the air. John, are you with us? Yeah, hello.
Hello?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, I had a question really about what makes this especially abhorrent is the sheer political motivation behind it. And I say that because if you were going to go after illegal immigrants, it seems that Minnesota would be one of the last places that you go. Here's where you would go. Wouldn't you go to Texas or Florida? Where's the show of force in Texas and Florida, which probably have 1 million, 1.5 million, close to 2 million estimated illegal immigrants, but there's none of this happening in Texas or Florida. I wonder why. I'll hang up and listen.
Thank you so much for the call. Well, actually, we did hear from Governor DeSantis a little bit on that. A little bit of sound from the governor here sort of talking about what Florida has been doing. And in his State of the State speech earlier this month, in his State of the State speech, Governor DeSantis touted Florida as working hand in glove with the federal government.
Florida is the only state in the country that requires state and local cooperation with federal interior enforcement efforts. In the past 9 months alone, Florida is responsible for the apprehension of nearly 20,000 illegal aliens that have been turned over to the Department of Homeland Security to be returned to their home countries. Our people are safer because of these efforts.
So that's just some sound from Governor DeSantis kicking off the legislative session a few weeks back. Does he have a point, though? Are we safer because of all 67 sheriff's departments and local law enforcement, along with the Florida Highway Patrol, are working with federal immigration? We haven't seen what's playing out here in Minnesota. Playing out here in Florida, to our caller John's point. But Florida has pursued a pretty aggressive policy of cracking down on undocumented immigrants, and the immigration detention facility in the Everglades, dubbed Alligator Alcatraz, is one example of this. And we're going to check in with our constitutional scholars if they can stay with us for a little bit longer about what is happening in Florida versus what we're seeing up in Minnesota. With us this hour, Clara Reynolds, President and CEO of the Crisis Center of Tampa Bay, Chara Torres-Spellisy, First Amendment lawyer and professor at Stetson Law, and Elizabeth Berenger, who's with Stetson Law as well. If you've got questions, if you're on the phone, stay on the line. We'll try and get to you next in a little bit. The number is 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562. And you can email us at FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Stay with us. Florida Matters Live and Local continues in a moment.
Evening at 9 on WUSF 89.7.
At WUSF, support comes from the people who listen, like you. Also, Badawi Law, offering legal services in personal injury, immigration, and auto accidents, with office information and practice details at badawilaw.com, or learn more on Instagram at Badawi Law. Women of Resistance is a fusion of music, art, and dance that brings to life the women of World War II who risked everything to fight oppression. March 25th and 26th at the new Tampa Performing Arts Center. For tickets, visit womenofresistance.org.
You're listening to WUSF 89.7, your spot for local.
Welcome back to Florida Matters Live and Local. We're continuing our conversation about immigration raids and protests that we're seeing in Minnesota. 2 U.S. citizens dead as a result of clashes with law enforcement up there. We want to hear from you. How's your mental health? What legal questions do you have? The number is 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562. You can also email FloridaMatters@WSF.org. And with us is Elizabeth Beringer. She's a professor at Stetson Law. We're also joined by Stetson Law Professor Chara Torres-Spelliscy and Clara Reynolds, who is President and CEO of the Crisis Center of Tampa Bay. Let's go to the phones. We've got Dan on the line. Dan, you're with us. Please let us know what you're thinking.
Yes, thank you for having me. I've been angry about the situation for a long time, but this is different. 2 nights ago, I went to sleep, went to bed, and woke up in the middle of the night so angry I could not go to sleep for 2 hours. So I'm losing sleep over it. I've had to limit how much I listen to because of that. I do want to make one comment and one question. I don't think this crackdown in Minnesota is primarily about immigration. I think it's primarily about terrorizing people so that they won't vote. And I say that because I think that what they want is violence so that the president can call an insurrection and bring in whatever and make it worse and then have a reason to intimidate people. So that's my view. I don't know what the other your experts there think.
Dan, thank you so much for your call. I really appreciate this. Professor Beringer, I wonder if I could kind of put that question to you. What about that? I mean, it's maybe a little bit hard to kind of imply motive here, but what are you seeing? What's going through your mind from a legal perspective as you see what's unfolding in Minnesota?
Sure. And yeah, I want to preface everything that I'm saying with, obviously, I can't step in the mind of someone else and speak to their motivations. And so I'd rather look at what is the practical impact. The practical impact of the federal government having such a obvious presence in Minneapolis, where the state has not said it was going to be as cooperative as in other places like Texas or Florida. The optics are that the government is very active in the streets. We see in Minnesota that that's bringing out protesters. It's bringing out mostly citizens who are speaking on behalf of their neighbors. But the people who don't feel safe coming into the streets, those Black and brown individuals who visually look like the people who are being targeted, they are afraid. They're afraid to come out right now. And so when it comes time to vote, they may very well be afraid to vote. 2 U.S. citizens have lost their lives. That makes it seem like a pretty scary proposition to even go out and peacefully protest. There may be people who are saying, well, this may not be worth it to me. They may have pressure from family members who are scared for their safety. And so generally when there is a heightened police presence, the freedom to speak feels less free. People tend to be more afraid. And when you're afraid, you tend to not speak out against your government.
Let me just read an email here from Jan in Tampa who writes, I felt real grief with the murder of 2 American citizens acting within their rights because I could relate to them. I am an American citizen. I will not break the law, but since this administration has proven to lie at all levels, it demands that we bear witness. I would follow and film the masked anonymous teams abusing my neighbors. I feel traumatized. The constitutional rights being blatantly violated in America and that some Americans continue to support this unlawful behavior. I am not for open borders. Why isn't the administration pushing for legislative measures to address the immigration issue? It appears the bully tactics in blue cities is the point. Thanks for that email, Jan. I wanted to just come back to something our previous caller, Dan, mentioned, though, Clara, and he was talking about having to kind of tune out a little bit to some of the news because of, how he's feeling about what he's seeing. What's your take on that?
I think, Dan, you're a genius. I think you have to absolutely unplug and take a break from the continuous news coverage and social media. And that doesn't mean that you're not being a good American citizen. It just means that you are prioritizing what you can handle. And so I also want to applaud you for even getting on the phone and talking about how angry you are and that it's impacting you. I think talking about it is one of the most important things that we can do. And you have to find that trusted circle that you can talk to about how you're feeling in order to be able to process these emotions. And Dan, I will continue to say to both Dan and Jan, you can't let these feelings fester. You have to find an outlet for them, or they will kind of overtake. So make sure that you are remembering that it's okay to take a break. Don't forget about you still have permission to get out, to enjoy the things that you enjoy. Make sure that you're eating right, that you're exercising. You've got to continue to take care of yourself if you want to be an effective agent of change. And I think, to both of our legal scholars, they talked about ways that you can take ownership of your feelings and also do something proactive with that. So, but you can't do that if you are not feeling well. You can't do that if you are just not able to process everything that's going on. So take care of yourself, talk, and then find a way to get involved so that you can feel like a positive impact, that you're having a positive impact.
Professor Torres Spelisi, to that point, kind of feeling like you have some agency and ownership is a good point, but there's also practicality, right? Thinking about what you should and shouldn't do if you're at a protest. What are just remind us some of those steps you can take to make sure you're doing what you can to exercise your constitutional rights and stay safe.
Yes. So one of the frustrations that I have as someone who watches the Supreme Court is last year, the Supreme Court decided that there were no longer going to be nationwide injunctions. And one impact of that we're seeing now, which is there were big protests in LA, and there was a ICE reaction to those protests, often including the use of chemical agents against protesters. Well, that was litigated in LA in a case called LA Press Club versus Noam. That judge basically said to ICE and DHS, stop aiming these projectiles at protesters' heads, the heads of the press that's covering it, and the heads of legal observers who are there to document things. And they won that case against the government, but that only applied in LA. And then you had similar findings in Chicago, and now we have litigation in Minneapolis. And I think the frustrating thing is it would be much, much better if we got some clarity, preferably from the Supreme Court, that said these tactics are not allowed anywhere in the United States. These are people who are exercising their First Amendment rights. But because of this other case, Trump versus Casa, which got rid of the nationwide injunctions, that means we have to have this fight 94 times, because that's how many district courts we have in the United States.
Yeah, some complicated kind of legal back and forth going there. Let me go back to the phones. The number, by the way, 813-755-6562 if you want to weigh in. I think we have Mackie on the line. Mackie, you're on the air. What are you thinking?
Well, I agree with Dan wholeheartedly. I am furious. My blood pressure is high. I do know how to take care of myself. And I have gone to No Kings marches. I have called both senators yesterday and every day. The problem I'm having is the emperor has no clothes, and I think everyone in Congress knows it. Who's going to step up and put put themselves as a hero and put themselves as a statesman to call this out and finally say enough is enough.
Yeah.
ICE agents killing American citizens on the street. The other thing is in Florida, we're a red state. So they're not coming to Florida in droves. They're not going to do that.
There may be some questions about that, but Mackie, I want to thank you for kind of weighing in there. And let me just note something from Congresswoman Kathy Castor, who's a Democratic congresswoman from the Tampa Bay region. She said she'd signed articles of impeachment against the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. And she said, quote, Secretary Noem and DHS employees have systematically violated the rights and privacy of Americans, terrorized our citizens, and obstructed Congress. So there's some action, I guess, from some of the folks in Congress there. We're also seeing people on the Republican side speaking out against some elements of what they're seeing in Minnesota. But let me go back to that point about it isn't going to happen here. This is a red state. Chara Torres Pelosi, I mean, there are, cities within states, and there are kind of questions, I guess, swirling about what a kind of ramped up immigration enforcement might look like. Do you have some thoughts on that?
Well, I also cannot get into the head of DHS, but the pattern that I can see from the outside is there seems to be enforcement either in blue states and or in blue cities. So we've seen LA and Chicago and Minneapolis, which fits the blue state model. And then we've also seen enforcements in New Orleans, which fits the blue city model. So Louisiana is pretty red, but New Orleans is sort of famously much more democratic. And I think that there are, at least it looks like from the outside, that there seems to be a priority in having these harsh tactics being used in either blue cities or blue states.
Okay, got another call coming in here. Let me see what we've got. Caller, go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to comment that I was a federal officer for more than a quarter of a century. What I'm seeing now dismays me. I've been assaulted, I've been threatened, I've been targeted by certain organizations, and I never once felt a need to hide behind a mask or to hide behind a false identity. These masks and these false identities, or these refusals to present credentials, make the officers anonymous. And when you're anonymous, you're emboldened to do any outrageous act.
Can I ask, sir, do you mind if I ask, what kind of federal officer were you?
I decline to answer that. It's too specific.
Okay, well, look, thanks for weighing, and I appreciate that. I mean,
sure.
Professor Berenger, any thoughts about the kind of, I guess, the anonymity? I mean, that has been a question circulating amongst folks saying, why are many of these agents wearing masks? Is there some sort of kind of element of law that you can speak to here that applies to that?
It's very outside the norm and customary practice for law enforcement. I'm not aware of any law that would prohibit them from hiding their faces, but I do tend to agree with the caller's point that the anonymity makes everything feel less safe. And it's not just because the law enforcement or the federal agents who may not necessarily be law enforcement, but who are acting in ways that law enforcement traditionally acts. It's not just that they may not have any limitations on themselves or that the anonymity makes them feel empowered or emboldened to do, whatever they want. It makes it harder for people on the ground to know whether they should be listening to these people, whether these people have actual authority over them. There's nothing to stop anyone from dressing like ICE is dressing and coming out and acting like ICE who isn't actually part of ICE. And then how would we know? how do we know that every masked person out there is deputized by ICE? And so it just creates a lot of unknowns that I think make it generally less safe for a variety of reasons.
We're going to have to wrap this conversation there, but hearing from plenty of you. Want to thank you for your calls, and thank you so much for our expert guests this hour, Elizabeth Beringer, Stetson Law Professor, also Professor Chara Torres-Spellisy from Stetson, and Clara Reynolds, President and CEO of the Crisis Center of Tampa Bay. Thank you so much
for
your comments and your insights. And stay with us. We're going to talk a little bit different next moment about Gasparilla. Stay tuned for that.
I'm Scott Tong. The Oscar-nominated documentary Mr. Nobody Against Putin is about Pasha Palankin, a Russian videographer who films pro-war propaganda in the local school.
And in many ways, this film is about Pasha coming to grips with what he has to do to get this footage out of Russia. He has to sacrifice his life there. He has to leave.
Next time, Here and Now.
Join us this afternoon from 1 to 3 on WUSF 89.7.
Listener support powers WUSF. Funding also comes from Seitenbacher, with a new web shop. Healthy muesli, cold-pressed oils, and vegetable broth mix delivered to your door from right here in Tampa Bay. Details at Seitenbacher.com. Seitenbacher. Seitenbacher. Tech House, celebrating 30 years as a strategic tech partner in the local community, helping small businesses navigate the terrain to stay secure and strong with AI, automation, and cloud security. More information is at tech-house.com.
Hey, I'm Gabriella Paul, and I report on people living paycheck to paycheck in the region.
They're firefighters, they're teachers, they're nurses, but they don't make enough money to pay the bills, and they're one paycheck away from being on the street or in some sort of substandard housing.
At WUSF, I tell your stories about the rising cost of living.
Welcome back to Florida Matters Live and Local. I'm Matthew Petty. Well, a pirate attack is looming on the coast of Tampa Bay, but don't worry, just means Gasparilla is next weekend. A cultural staple for over 120 years, that pirate invasion takes over Tampa has a unique history. The Henry B. Plant Museum has opened an exhibit titled Gaspar's Gold, Carnival and Community in a New South City, detailing the origins of the mythological pirate Jose Gaspar, who inspired Gasparilla. And WSF's Malia Leiden got a preview of the exhibit and now boards the SS Florida Matters to talk all things Gasparilla and pirate mythology. Malia, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
And if you're excited about the swashbuckling fun this weekend, you can give us a call and weigh in 813-755-6562. You can also send an email to floridamatters@wusf.org. Well, I mean, if you're new to Tampa or just living under the sea, what exactly is Gasparilla?
It's one of the largest outdoor celebrations in the country. And basically, there's going to be an invasion on Saturday with fictional pirates coming in to demand a key to the city. And then there's going to be a parade at 2 p.m. But if you want to watch the invasion, you'll want to be near the Tampa Convention Center because that's where all the action will happen. But actually, within this past hour, the pirates arrived in downtown Tampa today to formally summon the mayor to negotiate the city's ceremonial surrender.
Okay, so Gasparilla invasion is underway as we speak. Exciting breaking news there. Now, it's named after this fellow called Jose Gaspar. What is the myth behind Jose Gaspar?
The legend of Gaspar was a Spanish pirate who invaded Florida's coast hundreds of years ago. He was known for capturing ships, but one day a U.S. Navy ship in disguise confronted his ship and a battle started. He then tied himself to an anchor chain and jumped into the sea and hadn't been seen since. Mm-hmm. And more details, there's more to the legend, but more details could be found at Mystic Crew of Gasparilla's website.
That's a very detailed backstory, I got to say.
Yes.
Now, if you've got questions about Tampa's most famous pirate, you can give us a call, 813-755-6562. You can also email us, FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. If you're part of one of these crews coming up this weekend, we'd love to hear your input as well. Now, the story, as we mentioned in the lead into this, goes back quite a long way, more than a century. And here's a little bit of archival footage of the festival in 1950.
Tampa also enjoys another distinction. It is the only city in the world that is certain to be invaded and captured by pirates every February.
All right, so, I mean, if you're familiar with the Jose Gaspar legend, what does this exhibit add to that story? What does Gaspar's gold tell us about it? What did you learn about it, I guess?
I would say it goes beyond the pirate myth and into the heart of Tampa. It talks about the traditions of Gasparilla, how it started, and just kind of why it stayed for this many years. It started in 1904. And it actually started because a Tampa Tribune Society editor was planning an event theme. When the legend of Gasparilla was suggested, it was to promote the May Day Festival Parade. Mm-hmm. And then someone suggested Gasparilla, and then that led the Tampa Tribune started publishing letters from the mystic crew of Gasparilla that detailed an invasion. And then originally they came by horseback, and it wasn't a seaworthy event until 1911.
So wait, they had pirates on horseback?
Yes.
How did they kind of spin that?
It was just, I don't know how they spin that. That's a good question. I would argue that this was probably one of the best PR stunts ever in existence,
right,
because it was just to promote Tampa, Tampa's economic development, and how can we promote Tampa to the country and make it a recognized name.
Mm-hmm. It is interesting that they were able to take a May Day parade, which, I mean, I guess, you know, there's different ways of looking at May Day, but it's quite a different festival from a pirate festival, right? That's kind of like a 180 spin.
I mean, if you think about it, where else in the country could you have pirates invading but Florida? It's just such a Florida-esque thing. It's a unique thing, and I think that uniqueness enabled this to exist for over a century.
Yeah, it's interesting too because, I mean, to your point, like if you're going to have a pirate festival, there's no better place to have it than Tampa, right? You've got the port, you've got the kind of a lot of focus on the ocean, but it's sort of wishful thinking too because, you know, people have worked really hard to create this legend around Jose Gaspar, but it's a pretty slim myth when you think about it, when you dig it into it beneath the surface.
Yes, but I would say it's just a lot more of a cultural aspect of how can we, again, promote the city, and then just having fun with it, promoting letters. There was a lot of hijinks to the celebration. Just even today, you see people dressing up, and it's just a large celebration.
What is the most uniquely Tampa or Florida tradition, would you say, Malaya, about Gasparilla?
I would say even the concept of an invasion and people coming in via the water and just this big spectacle. But another thing that was big about the exhibit is that it kind of details how traditions have changed. One of the executive director for the museum, Charles Grow, was describing how he actually spoke with people in their 80s about their childhood memories in Tampa. And they detailed how there used to be pistols, and they would grab empty shell casings from the pistols in between the floats. Mm-hmm. And that's what they really remember about Gasparilla back in the day. And now it's a separate parade with children.
Okay. All right. So, and just walk me through that. So there were pistols and people were firing these things, presumably blanks, I hope.
Yeah.
But still shell casings?
Yes. They would dive in between the floats to grab the empty shell casings, and they would pack their lunches, and they would just find their little spot for the parade route, and then they would just dive right in. And that's starkly different compared to we just had the children's parade this past weekend, and now it's more of a separate event instead of it used to be completely all child friendly and just this one.
Yeah. I'm just kind of a little bit staggered that was kind of what they were going for. I mean, I see Gasparilla, I think about the beads, right? I guess it's not unique to Gasparilla, but you have this sort of Mardi Gras tradition of tossing out beads, the streets kind of covered with them. Or even like candy, but shell casings, that's something else.
And what I discovered at the exhibit is that we do have a tie to Mardi Gras, and that's where the beads didn't used to be a thing. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until another crew, the crew of Venus, came to Tampa around the 1960s, I believe. They were a crew at the Mardi Gras parade in New Orleans, initially just an all-women's crew, and then they came to Tampa in the 1960s as a co-ed crew, and that's what kind of brought these beads that you see that's traditionally more well-known in New Orleans for Mardi Gras, which I learned that apparently most cities tried to have their own version of Mardi Gras, and most cities failed, but Tampa has been able to keep this going.
Right. So the pirate is the special sauce when it comes to creating something unique and different. I mean, what else did you learn about the crews? Like, were they sort of part of this thing from the get-go, or was that something that, as you say, they sort of imported from the Mardi Gras tradition from New Orleans?
The crews kind of started because you had, but then it kept growing from there. But you also had different organizations like the Egypt Shriners, and I learned from Charles Grow that they were actually there prior during the May Day parade, and they would walk a camel, like they would ride a camel, walk a bear. There was a lot of hijinks to this. It was really only in Florida would you probably see someone walking a bear in this whole ordeal. But it's just really fascinating, kind of the history. But then there are also these illustrations by John Gastoff, who is known for making floats in America. And there were these like huge grotesque heads, and people in the 30s and the 40s, they used to wear them, and it was even more around the kind of same as the parades of importance. But nowadays you don't really see that.
Yeah. So, I mean, the pirate ship that comes in, I mean, I'm not sure how much you know about the history of that, but that's kind of the sort of thing that people are watching for, right? But are floats also sort of part of the Gasparilla tradition?
Yes, very much so, because it actually Gasparilla started in combination with the Florida State Fair, which all began at the Tampa Bay Hotel, which is now the Henry B. Plant Museum. So that's why they're kind of central to this story of kind of this combination of the Florida State Fair and Gasparilla was the secret sauce to making this a success.
Yeah, okay, so the Henry B. Plant Museum, and that's for folks who may be new to Tampa, or as we said earlier, living under the ocean and wondering what this is all about. That's the building which has these fantastic kind of like onion domes poking up. It's the University of Tampa, but it's also got the museum at the end of it. Used to be a hotel, and that was kind of quite key to the history of this whole parade getting started.
Yes, it was the site. So it was all combined for over 70 years. And then another thing that I think made this so big and recognized nationally is former First Lady Jackie Kennedy was actually seen holding a Junior League of Tampa Gasparilla cookbook. And so that photograph just kind of made it more well-known to people across America.
Wow, that is some product placement. Do we know who was able to get that cookbook into our hands? That's genius.
Yeah, it was. I mean, she was also connected to, Ann Lowe was the first famous African-American fashion designer, and she designed Kennedy's wedding dress and bridal party outfits and did the Gasparilla gowns. So it was all interconnected.
Yeah. In the last few seconds we have here, Malia, will the museum be doing anything special in addition to the exhibit during Gasparilla?
They'll have 2 scholars speaking, and it's going to be open. The exhibit runs through August 30th, and I know that they'll also have a partnership with the Tampa Theater for a pirate-themed series. But if you can learn more at WUSF.org.
Great, and then you can see Malia's reporting there. Her story on Gaspar's Gold Carnival and Community in a New South City is up on WUSF.org as well. Malia Lydon, thank you so much for your insights. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Well, coming up tomorrow on Florida Matters Live and Local, an update on the Ybor City car crash last November that left 4 dead and 13 injured. What's changed? We'll talk to community leaders and business owners. Tune in at noon. That's our show for today. Florida Matters executive producer is Grayson Doctor. Our producer is Amelie Horace. Our engineers are Jackson Harp and Gio Galvin. And Jackson composed our theme music. And Chandler Bolcom handled the video today. You can subscribe to Florida Matters wherever you get your podcasts and watch on WUSF's YouTube channel. I'm Matthew Petty. Thanks so much for being with us, and we'll see you tomorrow.